Hey, welcome back, everybody, to Geeks from the Multiverse. I am one of your hosts, Matt, and with me is John, and we have a great episode for you today. Well, great for me, bad for John, because we're going to be talking about Beetlejuice. Yes, we're going to be reviewing the movie. We're going to be talking about all kinds of things from behind the scenes to different facts. So, without further ado, let's get geeky. So, John, you're not a fan of this movie, huh?
Matt, I've already explained my thoughts on this movie, and I even agreed that I didn't really want to do this, but then I was like, you know what? I'm a 30-year-old man that needs to grow up, and
You just need to get over your fears, John.
look, man. I mean, when you get scarred as a kid watching a movie like this, and this is also the reason why I don't like mushrooms. And I've already explained.
I wonder if it's because of the more of the mushrooms than it is with Beetlejuice, to be honest.
So, because I would say most of you probably don't know this, but when I was a kid, okay, my dad and I and my brother were watching this movie, and of course we were like, hey, why don't we get pizza? Well, okay, no problem. So we sit there and we're waiting for the pizza, and of course we're watching the movie. We're doing our thing, and all of a sudden I like take a bite out of this pizza, and I'm like, this isn't normal in my opinion, because I've had pizza many times before, even though I was a kid. And so all of a sudden he's like, I'm like, Dad, what exactly is in this pizza? And he's like, oh, there's cheese, pepperoni, mushroom. And I'm like, what was the last part? Oh, like cheese. I'm like, no. What was that one particular thing you said? He's like, oh, mushroom. I'm like, he's like, oh, well, I guess you're not eating it. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm actually, really not wanting to even watch this movie, because at that time it was that one scene, and I can remember it till this day. It's the mom and the dad. And they had the dad basically, shapes his face into this long, like triangle pointed nose / like it's almost like a beak. Like he has a beak, and then the mother, I can't even remember everything, but I think it was just like
she opens her mouth really wide, and then she pops her eyes into her skull, and then it goes into her like a
mouth, and
they sit right on top of her tongue.
And I'm just like, I'm done. Like I can't do this anymore. The mushroom thing and everything else, and it freaked me out, man. And then for many years, I could not eat mushrooms, and I definitely couldn't watch this movie. And everyone's like, oh, it's a cult classic. I'm like, well, that's good for you, because I really don't like horror movies. And so, like, Matt, when we were talking about even the B-rated stuff, I'm like, I could probably watch that, because I know it's like stupid and funny, and it's not like as bad. But if I'm watching, some of the other scary movies, I'm like, no, man, like just get me out of this room. I'm all set with being, scared, shitless basically. And I don't really want to be like, freaked out. I know Matt, he's doing the haunt this whole entire month. So, I mean, he loves, doing the horror stuff. He loves watching movies like that. And, him and his wife do it all the time. But like my wife and I will be like, nope, let's watch something else. Let's like watch a rom-com, anything. Like, I don't want to do it.
My wife hates the horror stuff, but I mean, I will absolutely watch it. But I think that's where Beetlejuice is different, because it's not straight up horror. It's more, on the, fantasy comedy side than does it have aspects of horror in it? Of course it does. But I would say it's more on the gothic side, because it's more of that Tim Burton style.
So, I mean, I'm not saying that Tim Burton isn't a great director, because I know he's done really great movies. And I'm not saying, that I don't like his movies. It's just there's his style, his weird, crazy, ness of what he does. I mean, that's how he.
And we're gonna get into that.
Yeah, but I'm just
the Burtonesque.
Yeah, the Burtonesque
style that he has. We're gonna get into like what that style kind of is,
right,
a little bit later. But yeah, I think it's not exactly horror. I mean, it's more gothic, I think, than it is really like super scary. Although yes, there are elements. Like there's a scene where Beetlejuice turns into like the banister, upstairs turns into a snake, and you kind of see him like, you see the head, and like that's really like scary if you were like a younger kid.
Well, yeah, like I said, there was just certain aspects of that movie I just was like, I'm all set. Like I just don't care for it, kind of a deal.
But I mean, as far as Beetlejuice as a character, like even when I was younger, seeing it like for the first time, it's really one of those funny things because he's such an iconic character in this movie, and he delivers like so many iconic lines and is just so over the top. But yet, Michael Keaton in this movie is only in it for 18 minutes.
That's surprising to me, anyways, because I would have thought he would have been a lot longer than that.
He's only in the movie for 18 minutes, but he just takes over the movie. And I've always wanted to see more of Beetlejuice. That was always me. Like, I wanted to see more of the character, I wanted to learn more of the character. And yeah, the animated show was kind of kooky and funny and cool, but it wasn't a movie.
No, but it was like mini adventures with him. So
Yeah.
you kind of got to see the aspect of what Beetlejuice was on the outside of just that one movie. And so that's kind of why
Yeah.
they did that. But before we get into that, I wanted to mention something real quick. So there was a email that I just recently was notified about from my good buddy Matt over here, and I didn't realize it until this morning. Or actually, sorry, until right about now, which is 7:00 at night.
It did come this morning, I believe.
It was this morning, yes. But it was from my cousin Jeff, who, of course, he had to
It's
mention.
actually, I think, your dad's cousin.
Yeah, it was the way he said it was my dad's cousin, even though we're technically cousins. So I thought it was weird. But anyways, so he like goes on and he's talking about how, he just wanted to say that it's cool that I'm, that John's a geek, and how, of course, yes, my son has
What?
been born. Yes, I know. Probably.
You're a geek, John?
Yeah, you didn't know. That's why I'm doing this podcast
Oh
with
my
you.
gosh, I never knew.
And
I'm done.
I just think it's funny how he's like, congrats on being a dad. So yes, of course, my son was born in September. So I was like, yep, thank you, I appreciate that. Yep, got to get that applause in there. So, and it's funny because then he's talking about how he's like, my son's a geek, and keep up the good work. And I'm like, well, that's cool. I'm glad that you can at least share that with your son.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
hopefully one day I'll be able to do the same thing with him. But this is the part that Matt and I really wanted to talk about real quick. Was
Yeah.
he mentioned, I'm not going to say word for word because I know he screwed up the email here, but it said, I disagree with you on the Hulk movies because I enjoyed Edward Norton's Hulk better than the Eric Bana one. Now the thing is about that is that Eric Bana had a very different portrayal, of course, than Edward Norton. And Edward Norton,
yeah.
there was, so again, both movies had their own great aspects, but it wasn't, unfortunately, it was like, that was Marvel's DC's reboot for the movies.
Yeah,
Like,
neither one to me really. I mean, the acting in Eric Bana's version of just, his version is just Hulk. Like, that's the name of it. It's just Hulk. And the acting is not great. Like, the overall movie is not great. But I think the portrayal and pieces of what they did with the Hulk are good. Now, you get to Edward Norton, and, they really took elements of the Incredible Hulk TV show and just were like, hey, that looks great. Let's apply it to this Hulk.
well, and I mean, like, if you look at the different portrayals of what Eric Bana did and Edward Norton, I mean, Edward Norton's, version of it, because I remember watching it actually not too long ago. It was interesting, like, they brought in the whole, like, how he was in, South America, like, later on, and then, like,
Right.
he was kind of like jumping around and stuff. Eric Bana didn't really do that in his version of the Hulk. It wasn't like jumping around and, like, he would physically, when he was Hulk, he would jump from one spot to another, which that is technically one of his attributes, like,
Yes.
as the Hulk. But, like,
What I did like, though, with Eric Bana's is, like, the angrier he got, the bigger he actually grew, which is an actual Hulk thing, which I appreciated, which wasn't in the Edward Norton version. So, I
Right,
think
there's
like we're saying,
differences.
like, there's bits and pieces of both movies that are equally as good. And then, we kind of get to, maybe like the Avengers Hulk, which is
Right.
different from the future Avengers Hulk, which became more of the Professor Hulk, which
okay, he's
there
more
really hasn't been a good Hulk movie. And the rest of the email was basically saying, if we did a multiverse version of a movie with all three of them, that would be great. And I really disagree.
So I think this is where I'm going to jump in for a second. So like basically you're just going to be taking how Spider-Man and how they've just done that and like do that concept, which
Right.
is it worked well with Spider-Man because that made more sense than having three different
It
Hulks.
worked with Spider-Man because the other movies were actually semi-good. And the portrayals of Spider-Man were actually good and made sense. With the Hulk, it's different because they haven't fully portrayed the Hulk accurately.
Well, you're right. And I also think that, if you start throwing in like, of course, the original Hulk being green and then, you got the Red Hulk, which I'm assuming at some point they're going to start bringing that up with Thaddeus Ross and whatnot. But then like,
Which is supposed to be in the Captain America movie.
right, which is supposed to be coming out in next year, I believe. But and then Mr. Fix-It. So like that's cool. And you can have what was it, Joe? It was Joe Fix-It. Yeah. So like, they didn't really do a good job with either one of them to like show like if he was a gray Hulk or not. You know what I mean? So like I don't think that would make sense to have all three and then have like those different aspects to come.
I think they just need to legitimately go back to the comics and make a legitimately good Hulk movie that follows the comic book and not do what they've been doing, ditching this Professor Hulk and whatever they just did with like his son in She-Hulk.
Oh, that's
no.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Put that in the trash, and maybe if we ever want to talk about reboot, it would be the Hulk.
No, I agree. No, I absolutely agree with you.
That's where we start.
I think that if they were going to reboot, I mean, unfortunately, it would be the Hulk. And if they're going to probably do that, I mean, the only thing I could see them hopefully, if they ever wanted to justify the Hulk, they could do a World War Hulk like movie and have and explain how Scar came into play, because that would make more sense, in my opinion, because that is basically connected to how Scar comes into play in that sense, instead of just like, hey, here's my son, and you're like, wait.
It could be very easy for them to do so too. I mean, you do have this like She-Hulk character, and I never want to say like, yeah, let's introduce a character just to kill him off, but like, if you ever want Hulk to go off, it would be that moment of killing that character off, and then that's how you introduce like a legitimately Hulk movie where he goes off, and now the Avengers have to try to essentially take him down, which is where you get World War Hulk.
Right. Now, let's get back to what we originally going to be talking about here.
So back to Beetlejuice. The movie was made in 1988, and it was obviously, directed by Tim Burton. Some of the other guys, it was written by Michael McDowell, Warren Scarron, and Larry Wilson.
I have no idea who these people are.
I don't know who they are either, but that's who it was written by. Produced by the Geffen Company and distributed by Warner Brothers.
Yeah, Warner. Yeah, no,
Warner Brothers. Yes, I said that wrong, but thanks for correcting me.
No problem.
And it stars Alec Baldwin, Gina Davis, Jeffrey Jones, Catherine O'Hara, Winona Ryder, and Michael Keaton as the obviously title character Beetlejuice.
So I will say that that's a pretty heavy cast right there. I mean, you got Alec Baldwin, Catherine O'Hara, Winona Ryder, Michael Keaton. I mean, I don't really know who Gina Davis or Jeffrey Jones is, but I mean,
Gina Davis was pretty heavy in the 80s, and Jeffrey Jones was pretty heavy in the 80s, which obviously now he's pretty controversial now.
I would love to hear more about it later, but yeah.
If you just Google Jeffrey Jones, maybe not right now, but if you Google him, you'll find out some information that you might not know. But if you haven't seen Beetlejuice, the plot revolves around a recently deceased couple who, as ghosts, they haunt their former home to get rid of some obnoxious people that recently moved in. And they seem to have trouble, so they contact this really obnoxious and devious bio-exorcist called Beetlejuice.
Right. And
kind of goes horribly wrong for them.
Well, and I understand, like, in order to contact Beetlejuice, you have to say it 3 times. You have to say his name 3 times. We don't have to say it because I'm all set with him randomly coming in here right now, but I'm just saying that's how they would do it.
I'm pretty sure we've already said it multiple times already.
Yeah, that's true.
I think we're probably
I think we're good right now, but
So Beetlejuice actually did have some alternate titles, which are quite hilarious. So initially, when the movie was pitched, it wasn't called Beetlejuice. Surprisingly enough, it was actually called House Ghost.
I just think it's interesting how the next one that Burton described was Scared Sheetless. Like, and of course, it could have been a joke. It could have been a lot of things, but I just think it's funny how he was like, Scared Sheetless. That's the name of the movie.
It had to. I mean, I would only assume he was meaning that as a joke.
I would hope so because I mean, if you know, hey guys, you got to say his name, Scared Sheetless, like 3 times. That's to me, it just sounds like a tongue twister.
So one of the things that's kind of interesting to me is when we kind of you see these movies and you look at reviewing them and you look at the history, a lot of these movies have an original script, and oftentimes like they're rewritten. And that's like this one's really really interesting because Beetlejuice wasn't always in the original form. It wasn't a fantasy horror comedy. It was actually like very much horror, not comedy, not fantasy, straight up horror.
So it would have been. So you're saying that it could have been a lot worse than originally it was.
It was actually a lot worse, and I'll go into it. So initially, like in the beginning, like you kind of see the Maitlands crash their car on the bridge, and it's not like shown what happens to them. Although you kind of see their car go into the water. And then the next scene, they're in the house. So in the original script, the car crash is depicted very graphically. And it shows Barbara's arm being crushed and the couple screaming for help as they slowly drown in the river.
Yeah, that would have been really bad, especially with kids back in the day were watching this. Like, I'm already going to say this. Like, if I was watching that, like, I would hope that I don't even know if they would have done like an R rating at that time. They probably would have done like a PG-13, maybe.
With everything else, this movie would have been R rated.
Well, did they? I mean, technically, did they really do that back then? Did they really have a whole lot of like ratings per se?
Let me get through this and let me know if you think this movie would have an R rating, John.
Okay, well, go ahead.
So there is a reference that remained because Barbara in the rewrites remarks that her arm feels frozen upon returning home as a ghost. Now that could be because they were in the water and maybe the month that it was. I don't know, but that could have been an original reference to the original part of the script.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So and then a second thing that was in the original script was instead of possessing the Dietzes and forcing them to dance during dinner, which is one of like the most iconic scenes. That's like the Day-O,
Oh yeah, yep.
Banana Boat song scene where they're dancing and the shrimps become arms and they push them.
No, I do know what you're talking about.
The Maitlands actually cause a vine pattern carpet to come to life and attack the Dietzes by tangling them in their chairs.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't even know how horrific that would have been if they would have done something. I mean, if the vines like literally went through their like body and like went through their skin and went everything else, and then like made them do that. I feel like that would have been very like dramatic.
I don't necessarily think they would have done the dance. I think it's just the vines would have come to life from the carpet and literally like tied them to the chairs.
I mean, Tim Burton, I think in that sense, I'm glad that they went a different path, but I'm like, imagine, I mean, I can only imagine if this was really a straight up horror instead of just like a comedy, horror kind of thing.
And the character of Beetlejuice, the vision from McDowell was he was actually a winged demon who his original form was a short Middle Eastern man.
That's oddly specific. Like, I don't know why, but that's very
oddly specific. Yes. But his intent was killing the Dietzes rather than scaring them.
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, that alone definitely could have easily gone an R rating and depending on that.
And from Lydia, instead of wanting to marry her, which is what Beetlejuice wanted in the rewrites, the only thing that Beetlejuice wanted in the original script was sex.
Yeah, so I mean, slowly but surely, this could have been an R-rated movie.
Yeah, this is getting to be a lot worse. And then the original version of the script, Beetlejuice only needed to be exhumed from the grave to be summoned. So after which he was free to wreak havoc. He could be summoned. He couldn't be summoned or controlled by saying his name 3 times. And basically, he could wander the world freely, and he would basically appear to torment different characters with different manifestations.
It almost sounds like It,
Very much so.
but in this case, not in a sewer. But yeah, I mean that's kind of what this is like more describing a little bit.
And then the script also featured a second Dietz child, a 9-year-old Kathy. And Kathy was the only person able to see the Maitlands. So it wasn't Lydia. It was actually this new character that we didn't see, which is Kathy. She was able to see the Maitlands, and Kathy was the subject of Beetlejuice's homicidal wrath in the film's climax, which he mutilates her in the form of a rabid squirrel before revealing his true form.
Okay, I mean I was looking at that and I'm like, what is going on here? Like Burton, if you would have made this movie,
Is like, I mean, I think if they made this movie the way that it wouldn't have been Beetlejuice, but it would have been a whole different movie. One,
entirely, yeah.
But like you kind of look at the original script and you're like, what the heck is going on with this movie? Because it's all over the place.
I just don't understand how, when they originally wrote this, like, how do you think that this would have played out? Like, especially in the late 80s and early
I don't
90s.
know.
Like, I mean, I understand that there was some weird, stuff going on around that time, but like, I can't even imagine if, like, what if they did a spoof movie on just this script alone, and they just did it, like, let's say now, they just did a spoof movie on this. Because I mean, that would be different now. I mean, think about the CGI and all the effects they could do with this.
I feel like this would be like Attack of the Killer Donuts or like one of those. It would be one of those movies.
It would be like a B-rated. Yeah.
None of this makes any sense put together.
No, not one bit.
So I am glad that they did the changes that they did, because it did make the movie what it is today. But there is another version of the script, and I actually do really like this part, and I wish there was maybe like an alternate version of the ending, because I actually kind of do like this part. The alternate version, the film would have concluded with the Maitlands, the Dietzes, and Ortho conducting an exorcism that destroys Beetlejuice, and the Maitlands transforming into miniature versions of themselves, and then moving into Adam's model of their home, which they refurbished to look like their house before the Dietzes moved in.
I mean, it would have been interesting, but then like the thing is then you wonder, like, if they made another movie, like, could he come back? Could Beetlejuice come back in that sense? You know what I mean? And then I feel like it would have been definitely more of a horror.
Well, because they do introduce, like, I don't know what particular door it was, but they do show that door that has all the exorcised spirits when the Maitlands are going through to find the sixth door to meet their social worker.
Yeah. I mean, again,
so I mean, it would have been possible to still have Beetlejuice in a sequel, but I mean, in '88 they weren't thinking about making a sequel.
Well, they never did. So it's like that was the only movie, and then they made the show, and then video games after that. But I mean, I think they were. I don't know if it was just recently though that they were talking about making another movie.
Yeah, they've already done filming it.
Oh, so I mean, I don't know when it's supposed to come out, but I figured that it would probably come out, my guess, maybe next year or whatever. But that's what I figured. Like that would be, really the case if like they're going to plan on doing like a reboot of the story, or if they're going to continue on.
Yeah, I'm not 100% on the story. I do know from the set, like where the house was, there were a couple set pieces that were stolen from the set. So I do know that much, but I know that they have already done all the principal photography and everything. So I don't know if they're like editing or if they're doing, the finishing touches on it. Like I really don't know like where in the process of the movie they are, but there definitely is a sequel.
I'd just be interested to see if they're going to continue on or just reboot the whole thing.
I don't think they're rebooting, but we'll get there.
Okay,
We'll
my
get there.
bad.
There's a little bit of information, but there's not a whole lot of information on the plot, obviously. But um, so we'll get into some casting, John. So Beetlejuice, obviously we know Michael Keaton was the title character, um, but Michael Keaton wasn't Tim Burton's first choice.
Oh no.
So the first choice, which I do find interesting, because I think at least in '88, this first guy would have had to at least be maybe in his 60s.
Yeah, I think he was probably maybe there. He was. I mean, he's well known, but like I don't know how well he would have done per se as this, but as basically Beetlejuice at the time.
Yeah. So the first guy that Burton's original choice was Sammy Davis Jr.
Again, he's been known for many films over the
Right.
years and great musician and everything else, but it's like, no, I just don't know if he would have done a great job in this.
Not for like what the script was that they used for the movie itself.
Well,
Obviously not for the original script either.
no, no, no. Well, actually, I mean, maybe the original, I don't know, but like the new, like the way that Tim Burton did it, yes, maybe. No, he would
But
have
I
never
think
been a good choice.
I think what was said was he kind of envisioned that kind of like lounge singer kind of attitude, which is why I think he gravitated towards Sammy Davis Jr. I think the producers had a different idea because they actually liked Dudley Moore, which I don't see. And the next one I think is fairly interesting, and I, for the life of me, I mean, with the way that Michael Keaton delivered the lines, I could kind of see it, but with Sam Kinison, I could maybe see it maybe going from like where Michael Keaton did it to like 0 to 100. Because when you listen to Sam Kinison and you listen to his comedy, like he would talk normal, and then all of a sudden he would talk like that, like like
Well, you didn't have to scream it, but I get the idea.
like he would just like yell, and I could see where he would fit that character, but like I don't know per se like the personality and the attitude was quite Michael Keaton.
I mean, no, that's the thing about Michael Keaton is that there's a reason why he's been well known. I mean, he did
Yeah.
the original Batman. He's done this. I mean, I know he's done other movies. I just can't think of them off the top of my head. But like him being, let's say,
Mom.
okay, again, but like like doing Vulture and like the new Spider-Man and stuff like that, and then like reprising his role in the Flashpoint. Like it was good. It was really great that he did all that. But like I'm just glad that yes, this is one of his more iconic roles that he's done. And like, of course, most people would be like, "Oh, Michael Keaton, yeah, I remember him." You could be like, "Oh yeah," you could either go back to the '80s or you can go literally, let's say now. So it really he spans for so long,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
he's known.
And Michael Keaton actually first turned down this role, which is not surprising for a lot of, for a lot of actors. Like you do a lot of these reviews and you do find like a lot of actors do initially turn down the role until like, the director actually brings them in and explains like this is what the movie's about, like, take a look at the set, like this is what we're doing. And that's kind of exactly what he did with Michael Keaton is he brought him to the set and explained like a little bit more about the movie because all he gave Michael Keaton was the script. And that's all he gave all of these different actors and actresses was the script. And even Alec Baldwin was like, I don't know if I want to do this movie because if I do it, my career literally could be dead just by doing this one movie because this script does not make any sense whatsoever.
No, yeah, I full-heartedly agree that. I mean, with Michael Keaton, it's I'm glad that he finally decided like this was the role that he should have done in the beginning because, like I already mentioned, like with him being Batman, with him being this, like he was
Yeah.
a well-known character or really like actor in like the '80s and moving forward. I mean, but unfortunately, once he got older, it kind of died down a little bit, and then finally now he's kind of redefined the role again as Batman, but do I see him really doing a whole lot, between the '80s and '90s? Yeah, he can do a little bit here and there, but like now it's kind of like onesie twosies. What can we get them in? At that point, so it's kind of like here and there. But yeah. So Lydia, I was kind of looking at this a little bit. So
there's a lot of actresses in there.
Yeah, I mean, so for example, they were trying to audition a lot of people like Sarah Jessica Parker. So again, Sex and the City and a few other movies as well. Brooke Shields, okay, that would have been an interesting choice. Lawyer Laughlin, who I know was on Full House.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that I know that. I don't know who Diane Lane is. Justin Bateman, Molly Ringwald. Okay,
Molly Ringwald, yeah,
good actress. Juliette Lewis and Jennifer Connelly. I mean, Alyssa Milano, though, that's surprising that she was the runner-up. Like, after, looking at all these like other actresses that are like really well known, and Alyssa Milano, because I think she wasn't that old at that time.
No, I mean, she probably was around the same age, I would say. I mean, obviously, like some of these actresses eventually went on to do, pretty big things. Like Juliette Lewis went on to do some pretty big movies. I mean, they weren't huge movies, but I think they were, Natural Born Killers and Dusk Till Dawn. Like those were pretty big movies at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, like Molly Ringwald with was it 16 Candles, right?
Oh, Molly Ringwald in the 80s was pretty much like all of them.
Like she was the main lead for a lot of these movies. Like I know, like I said, 16 Candles, a few other ones. I know she's done a lot. So like, I mean, at that time, I'm surprised that, she couldn't have gotten it, because she could have definitely gotten this role easily if that was the case.
And I think, Burton, seeing her in Lucas, and I think I've seen Lucas, but obviously it's been a long time. But her performance in that movie is what pushed her over the edge over Alyssa Milano, where she was ultimately cast for that role. I don't know how Alyssa Milano would have done in that role, to be honest, but
I think she would have been more ditzy, or like
I don't know if she would have been playing, if she would have been able to pull off the, kind of emo-ish attitude that
that Ryder really did in that movie, which that kind of, really made that whole, character as a whole. I mean, it was just, that's
she kind of did it over the top, obviously, for the movie, but I wouldn't see Alyssa Milano doing that. It would have been very cheesy acting, I think, on her part to do it like that.
Well, like I said, I mean, I know she's played a lot of serious roles and stuff like that, later on in her career, but like, I can't imagine someone like her to, try to do like a really gothic emo kind of character, and then be like, okay, let's talk about this, like really monotone and like not really showing emotion as much as like Ryder did in that movie.
Yeah. So Delia, I could see this one, because this one actually does make sense to me. Angelica Houston was initially cast as Delia Dietz. And I could actually see that one.
I mean, I could see that too.
I could actually see that.
But I think, O'Hara, I think, she really did a good job, with
she
really
did
at the time.
And Angelica Houston only dropped out because of an illness at the time. So she had to drop out, and then Catherine O'Hara was put in the role pretty much immediately. And it really wasn't, I don't think, much of a question. Like,
well, yeah, I mean, like I said, like when I mentioned the whole in the very beginning, like you have a lot of A-list, actors and actresses that are playing, in this film, which is
right.
And I mean, did Beetlejuice do well in the box office? I mean, yeah, I think it did, decent, but it wasn't
I think from what I was looking at, if I have the numbers right, which I probably don't, I think they made the movie for 17 million, and I think the initial box office was like 75.
So I mean, it was okay. I mean, it wasn't like,
I mean, you look at, the movie came out in 88, and you look at all of the merch and all of the DVD sales, and I mean, the movie still sells now.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely.
And it's like it streams on. I mean, right now it's streaming on Max, but like,
it's like for example, it's like if you're watching like Halloween stuff, so like Halloween Town or Hocus Pocus or stuff like that. So you could be like, oh, okay, that's Halloween related. So you can add Beetlejuice to the list because like that's just something that people have done, and I've seen it on like freeform, like, oh, hey, we got a Halloween, movies and stuff. And so like Beetlejuice would, randomly pop up and whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, moving, kind of moving forward here, the scenes though. I mean, I've already told you about that one weird scene, but I mean,
I have a couple of favorite scenes of mine. And I mean, there's a lot of scenes where we could talk all day about,
oh, I mean, if you're talking about favorite scenes, then I could just be like, sure, yeah, go with the flow, because that's what I'd be doing.
There's so many different Beetlejuice quotes. There's so many, good scenes, but I think for me, like there was a couple good scenes, which the first one is when the Maitlands they first go to like the waiting room for the dead when they're waiting for their caseworker, and they're struggling to learn the rules outlined in the handbook for the recently deceased, and ultimately like they end up kind of like the dead becomes like this kind of bureaucratic like waiting room with like these other dead. Like they're waiting to see like the social worker. It kind of becomes like kind of like social services like we have.
Well, yeah, currently
for the living, but they have them for the dead. And the fellow deceased are very, very memorable in this clip. Like there's a woman cut in half. Like she's like the magician assistant who gets cut in half, but she's literally cut in half.
Cut in half, yeah.
And there's a man with a shrunken head who, the description that I have says he puts the moves on Barbara. I think he just kind of looks at her. I don't know if he's really putting the moves on her, but he has a shrunken head. So it's funny. You know what I mean? It's like, and then the most funniest one is there's a charred guy smoking, and he kind of like looks over and he's like, hey, you want a cigarette? And Adam Maitland, who's played by Alec Baldwin's like, no, I'm all set. And he's like, oh, I'm trying to cut down myself, as he takes a puff on the cigarette. Like he's literally like a skeleton, like a charred skeleton. And it's like the most funniest scene to me, because it's like, you died probably because you lit your house on fire, like smoking.
Well, it's like it just reminds me of like the like old women, or like the older men that that keep smoking for many years, and they have COPD, and then they have like the air canisters, like the air gas canisters right next to them, and they're just like keep smoking, and then that you're like, hey, you keep doing that, and you could actually blow yourself up, and they're like, it's okay, and then like one of them actually does, and it's like, could that have happened? You know what I mean? Like
it very well could be, and he had such like a normal sounding like, hey, you want a cigarette? Like a normal sounding voice. It was like just the funniest scene to me. The second one obviously is when the Maitlands first meet Beetlejuice. Like this is one of the scenes that I like the most, because it's really like the scene where I think Beetlejuice has the most kind of improvised dialogue.
Well, I mean, if he's only in for 18 minutes, he's gonna come up with something at that point.
Well, because most of the time, like you kind of see him, and they're like little short segments here, there. Maybe a little bit at the end when they're getting married, and you see those kind of scenes. But this one is like he's just going bonkers. Like the Maitlands, they realize like they can't get these Dietzes out of their house, and they really want to give Beetlejuice a try. And they kind of, dig up Beetlejuice's grave, and immediately, like within minutes of him rising from the, his coffin, immediately regret. Like it's immediate regret.
Well, of course. I mean, I mean, the character itself, I mean, it says it already. I mean, like we talked about this earlier. I mean, it was in one of the other episodes where, we were talking about like in like scary movies, like, you see all the white people, kind of like, oh, let's run towards danger, I mean, unfortunately, it was two white people let's just do it. No problem. There's no consequences. And you're like, are you sure you want to do that, bud? Like, is that really a good idea at this moment? And you're like, yeah, whatever, it's fine. And then they're like, oh, we shouldn't have done that. And it's like, well, that was stupid on you to think that was okay to, to rise this guy from the grave and whatnot.
Yeah,
But
it's just Michael Keaton's performance just in that in that scene was so great. Like the craziness, like he just went full out with the character, and like you could tell, like he just went full out with the character. Like it wasn't like pretend acting. Like he just was Beetlejuice in those moments, and it was such just a great and funny, like so many one-liners. Like that to me is like I wanted to see more of that in the movie, and you kind of see like little bits and pieces in the rest of the movie. Um, you get to see a little bit more at the end, but like I hope in the sequel there's a lot more Beetlejuice.
well, again, I mean, you're talking about the 80s versus the 20s now. That's kind of weird to say. It's like,
Yeah.
but like, like I've already told you with the CGI and all the effects and whatnot. I mean, this movie could be, I don't know. I mean, it could be pretty amazing or it could be a B-rated movie. And hopefully that's not the case, but like, hopefully they'll actually, step up the game if, for those who actually like Beetlejuice. I'm just saying.
I happen to think they'll probably step it up. So from all of Tim Burton's movies, like we know he has a particular style, right? Like it's that Burtonesque style. It's very like jagged edges, curvy, like
It's the weirdness. Like
yeah.
it's the crazy weirdness that he brings into the table. I mean, you look at like, well, I mean, he's always loved working with Johnny Depp. Like that was like one of his favorite people to go to. He's like, oh, I got a movie. Yep, I'll sign on because we've done so many movies together. So like Edward Scissorhands, and like
Yeah.
Alice in Wonderland and all this other stuff. I mean, he literally takes a plot of a story and he's like, you know what? Let's just make it really weird and really unexpected because that's kind of what
this
he
actually
does.
comes from something. It's actually not from Tim Burton himself, although he does make it his own, obviously.
Oh yeah.
A lot of like the sandworms and a lot of those like little things are his artwork, but a lot of like what he does with like the sets and the cinematic medium is actually like it's actually German expressionism is what it's called.
Hmm.
Um,
Okay.
and in the 1920s, like it kind of spread in Europe, and it's kind of a medium which like the overall scene and the production design kind of have like a like a dream like unreality. Um, and it's a way that they tell the story, and there's like all the features within the frame have a distinct point of origin. So when you're especially like in the kind of in that last scene where that priest comes out of the wall, like comes out of that fireplace,
Yeah.
and the fireplace is like all kind of distorted.
Yeah. No,
You
yeah.
see like a lot of those types of things, but like everything kind of has one distinct origin point where you don't really see it as a watcher, but everything in this shot like has one particular point where it's a lot of like weird curves, a lot of weird the scene creates a lot of weird tension.
I mean, looking at the movie as a whole, I mean, like I've already said, like, Tim Burton like takes the plot, he makes it his own, and then he just creates this weird, wacky, style of it, but it could be horror, it could be whatever, and then like make it into like a comedy in some sense. I mean, it's cool that he does, certain things from the past, doing that German expressionism and then like bringing it into play, but like, I mean, when you look at like I
Yeah, I
said,
mean it's just elements of what he's using, and like it's like the sets, like what this is saying, like sets with jagged edges, and alternatively rounded and tilted, visually disjointed, discombobulated spaces, like are a key element of expressionism. Having like a general sense of like that visual distortion, and then like dialing up like the visual contrast. So if you like when you see like I think Beetlejuice did it a lot, like a lot of his movies do this where you'll see a lot of black and whites, and then all of a sudden, like you'll see reds and yellows and blues really pop.
Yeah, because he's trying to get the viewer to to look at all this and look at it at the time. So like when you look at Beetlejuice, I mean his character having green hair, having the white makeup and the black, kind of like eyeshadow and all that
Yeah, and
like
he wears a
differentness.
black and white suit, so like you
Well, it's a
see like
pinstripe, really. It's the
yeah,
black and white print. Yeah,
but you see like the green stuff on his face and the green the green colored hair, but then like you see that model with like the bright flashing lights behind him, and you see
yeah.
like all these really bright colors, and then you look at the Maitlands and it's just a normal scene.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're all dressed up really fancy from like especially at the dinner table, they're all really dressed up really nice and everything else. And of course, Peter just comes out of nowhere and he's just doing his thing and
Yeah.
causing a ruckus. But it's like
And
you're
you
right.
look at the Dietz's house too. I mean, the way that they redesigned it, everything was like black and grays. But then there were like little touches of red here, little touches of red there. Like that's kind of that expressionism style where, everything is really kind of not everything is distorted, but it has like that really color pop. And then in comes like Beetlejuice where a lot of that is distorted. And if you watch the animated show is all of that.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
Like the animated show just does it in a different manner. Like it's the whole thing. And you know, a lot of what his style is too is like maybe not so much with Beetlejuice, but like you look at some of the other ones, like Nightmare Before Christmas, um, is like the Day of the Dead celebration where you get the colored skulls and um, the skeletons and those really I think play a factor in a lot of what he does where you see Jack Skellington and you see a lot of these other movies where they're really colorfully decorated.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, well, and then you look at like if you're mentioning the Nightmare Before Christmas, it's like it's all the like the spooky, of course, like Halloween esque, kind of like setting, and then all of a sudden, like he meets Santa Claus, and like it's all the bright colors and everything else.
Yeah.
It's interesting like how you can take like a very normal generic like your blacks, your whites, your grays, all this other stuff like come into play, and then like really pop like
Right.
you've already mentioned, and it's nice how you can take a really like very bland kind of colors, and then like all of a sudden like mix in those reds, mix in the greens,
And
the
you
blues.
really see that distortion and the jagged edges and the curves, especially like with that iconic scene where Jack is walking up that like kind of curved little mountain thing that
Yeah,
curves at
yep,
the end.
yep.
Like that's really that expressionism, but it's Burtonesque because
Right.
he just makes it his own. And then the other kind of the third part of that is where Tim Burton really does well is he makes it gothic.
Well, I feel like he kind of not saying coined. I mean, because of course Gothic has been around for many. Well, I was going to say centuries, but it he kind of brought it into a more modern take on it. You know what I mean? Like I think that's kind of what I'm kind of gathering from all this is like he made it more mainstream.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so like he made it seem like okay, you know what, you can be Gothic and you could be weird and it's okay. Like
Yeah. I
was
mean, it
one of those
became like a
things.
certain aesthetic, a certain look that's meant to kind of like horrify. And he just kind of uses it when he applies it to, you know, the scenery, the characters, different aspects of everything that he's doing. You look at Edward Scissorhands.
Oh yeah, like I meant, yeah, exactly. Like I
And
mentioned.
there's a particular shot where they show like the street that all the people live on, which is like 1950s neighborhood,
Oh yeah.
and then all the way at the end of the street is this dark mountain with this castle on the top of it. It's totally out of place. It doesn't belong there.
No,
And all you can say is, yeah, that's Tim Burton.
I was gonna.
Right there.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. It's like he makes it his own, and he doesn't
Yeah.
care. Like he makes it his style and his view of being different. I mean, that's kind of like what we talk about all the time is being a geek. I mean, you don't want to be normal in this case. You want to be
Yeah.
different. You want to be, and that's what he does. And I think I was going to mention this actually. What if Tim Burton decided to like team up with like DC? And what if he made a couple movies? You think he would do well instead of like, how how they've been doing it now? I mean,
And I think, to be honest, I think Tim Burton's been really critical. I think if you look up some of the things, like I think he's been actually really critical of DC lately, only
oh,
because they actually used Michael Keaton as Batman, and I think that's why I think he actually said a comment about DC as a whole regarding, you know,
right, his portrayal and whatnot. I
yeah.
mean, I think Tim Burton. I mean, he has every right to be critical of that. I mean, because he's a well known director. I mean, he's done a lot of great films in this case, and he has a different style about him. But like if you take the choices of like Snack Snyder, and you take his versions of Justice League and whatever, like I just think it would be interesting to see if Tim Burton would make a totally different realm
I
of
mean, you would have to give him complete creative freedom, and that's not what they're willing to do. So someone like Tim Burton would never sign on with DC or Marvel because they wouldn't have that complete creative freedom to do
But
that.
technically, when he directed the film, he was working with Warner Brothers. So it's just funny how you would think that wouldn't
Yes,
be the
he
case.
did, but he also, like, if you actually look up like a lot of the facts on Beetlejuice, like when he was given the script, he fired the original script writer and hired his own, and they rewrote the entire script.
I mean, and that's a good thing because if that was the original
So
version, yeah, no,
I think if they came back and they said, this is your script and this is the movie," he would have probably came back and said, "You can find somebody else to make it." Because he's just one of those guys. I think when you look at directors, like he would not make a movie that he doesn't agree with.
no, and that's why I said if he made that comment on Michael Keaton, I think it's totally fair and right of him to say that because I mean, the way DC's been going, I mean, we've already talked about it multiple times, and I know how we like to bring it up, but it's like I feel like you
Yeah,
should listen to him.
how's that Blue Beetle doing? I'm not going to go there. Let's move on.
Oh, now you want to move on?
Yeah,
Fine.
let's move on. We don't need to go there because we know where Blue Beetle is. He's in the same trash can that the Flash is in.
They're not. Wait, hold on now. They're not considered in the same world because it's DC Elseworlds.
Well,
Baby.
they're in the same trash can. All right, some facts. These are kind of cool, actually, I think. So Beetlejuice is the name of one of the stars in the Orion constellation.
Okay, never would have thought that it would have been a betrayal from that, but okay.
It's just kind of one of those crazy facts that when I looked it up, it was one of the very first ones, and I saw it a couple times in a different website. So hey, it was worth including. Um, this next one, I think it is fairly interesting because maybe as a kid, like I guess I didn't realize how much like suicide plays a role in this movie. Um, but characters who died from suicide are actually the civil servants in the movie.
So you're saying like the manual labor, like basically like your butlers and your in that sense, or is this something?
No, like in the waiting room, like there was the kind of the secretary.
Oh, okay. So like
Like
okay.
she split, like she cut her wrist.
Ah, okay.
I don't know so much about the flat guy. Like I know he got ran over, obviously.
I
But I
mean,
don't know if he did it on purpose or if he just got ran over on accident. Like I don't know. But you look at Juno, who is the social worker, her neck is slit.
okay.
So you look at like a lot of these like characters in there, and they're all like, you in the scene where they're walking towards Juno's office, there's a guy that's handing out papers
Yeah.
and he's hanging from a noose. So he's literally like he's on like this conveyor going down the hallway, and he's holding papers and he's like spinning in circles, and he gets to one of the desks and he kind of just throws the papers at one of the ladies sitting at the desk.
That's, it's interesting. Like you say that. I mean, like, it's just weird to me. Like, they would use that like very specific detail, for, this movie.
Yeah.
Because like, when you look at all the other characters, I mean, like, again, the woman literally cut in half, and then, the guy literally smoking, and he's charred and everything else. And it's just like, okay, they just died because of weird accidents or whatever. Then you start throwing in suicide. It's like,
they don't
that's kinda
necessarily
weird.
say
Oh,
that,
no,
but
no,
like all of
yeah.
the people that are in there, like, all have like some kind of a suicide scar. Juno has the slit on the throat. I mean, you can say like, yeah, maybe she didn't do it. Maybe she would die a different way. But, you have the secretary who has a slit wrist. You have the guy who's hanging. Lydia at one point is writing a suicide note. So, it's one of those kind of overarching themes, I think, in this movie that, you don't kind of realize it until you kind of like really, really look at it and you go, huh.
Well, I mean, like, again, as a kid, you're probably not going to notice that, but as an adult, you're like, oh, okay, that's a little dark, but okay, that's how they want to, I guess, go with it, kind of a thing. But you're right, it is something kind of weird and interesting. But
So,
well, hold on, because
don't commit suicide because you'll be a civil servant,
Oh no, well, yeah, you don't want to be doing that, but I mean, so this next one, so Harry Belafonte's Deo, okay, became synonymous with Beetlejuice in the years following the movie's release. So if you actually listen to it, you'll detect the voice of the composer and longtime Burton collaborator Danny Elfman singing Deo, just as the logo for the Giffen company pops up in the movie's.
I did notice that. I watched this yesterday and I did notice that.
So I just think it's interesting, like, with Deo, like, I mean, it's always been a very popular, song, and I mean, it's in, some movies as well, but like, I just never would have, like, for many years, you know what I mean? Like basically, cinemously, like, hey, we're going to make this the same thing as Beetlejuice, and like people know it because of Beetlejuice, you know what I mean? Like, I never would have thought that in like right now.
I honestly don't think I would have known it from any other thing but Beetlejuice.
I mean, see, I can't say that because I've heard of other, just like hearing it. Of course, there's like cover versions of it and whatnot, but like, I mean, I can't say that I would just assume like I'm gonna, associate that with, Beetlejuice. I mean, I get it because in that one, scene at the dinner table, like that's where, it.
I mean, that's what I think of when I hear the song, but I mean, I also think of like the very, very end when, Lydia's kind of, floating, next to the stairs, and she's like kind of doing that dance with the football players behind her. Like, I think of that when I hear the song, but it's interesting too. And I didn't include this in there, but Deo wasn't actually in the original idea of doing that song. I believe it was When a Man Meets a Woman. I think I have the name of that movie, that song right.
That would have been even weirder in my opinion.
But every time they went to use it, it kept getting more and more expensive.
Interesting. So when Deo, okay.
So they changed the song to Deo because I think the song was like literally, I think like $300 to use it altogether.
Oh, of course. I mean, that makes sense.
It was cheaper to use, so they just kept using it over and over again. So
I mean, that is interesting how they had to use it because of financial reasons. But I mean, I just never would have thought of like that.
Reactions to the characters were so enthusiastic. The filmmakers shot a new outro for Michael Keaton's Beetlejuice. And that was the scene at the very, very end when he's in the waiting room and he kind of steals the, ticket from the witch doctor.
I mean, I guess you could have used that as like a blooper or something like that. You know what I mean? I don't know.
The original ending was when, with the sandworm coming down and eating him. And again, I think because of how Michael Keaton played the character, obviously, like, he was such a popular character, and I don't think fans really wanted to see him go down like that. So they shot this kind of outro that was like, he's sitting in the couch between the guy with the shrunken head, and then the guy next to him was the witch doctor who did the shrunken head. So he's kind of interacting with him, and he's looking at the witch doctor, and he looks at his ticket, and he's like, 9 trillion whatever, like it's a huge number.
Oh yeah.
And he looks up at the number, and they're calling 3, and he looks over at
Oh,
the witch
God.
doctor, and the witch doctor has number 4.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
he turns over and he starts talking to him, and he's like, "Hey, is that Elvis?" And the witch doctor looks over, and he throws his paper over at him, and he takes his number. He's like, "Well, it looks like I'm next." It's just
No, I know it's that quick little scene, but yeah.
it's a quick little scene, but it's really cool because it does kind of open up that sequel.
No, but that's what I'm saying though. It's like, maybe if that was the case, sure. But if they went with the original, like saying we're meeting him, like, I think you could have played it off as like, could he come back? Could he not come back? Like Emma.
I think it gave it too final of an ending.
mean,
I think that kind of makes it. I mean, yes, the witch doctor does shrink his head.
No,
So-
but I mean, it takes, if you think about it, like actual amount of years. I mean, this movie came out in '88. I mean, we're talking almost 35 years later that now they're making a sequel. So like, you know what I mean? Like they could have made a sequel in the '90s. They could have made it in
I mean,
2000s, whatever.
That's not how it is, anyways. So who knows?
Whatever.
1990, Tim Burton commissioned Jonathan Gems, who had done some uncredited script doctoring on Batman, to write a script for a Beetlejuice sequel called Beetlejuice Goes Hawaiian.
No. I can't imagine
It's
that.
actually, I think it's actually kind of cool. So the script would have seen the Dietz family opening a tropical resort when they discover the property was built on the burial ground of an ancient Hawaiian kahuna. They once again find themselves in need of Beetlejuice's services. While Keaton and Ryder signed on, the project never came to fruition.
That's the thing. I mean, because if they would have done it, it would have been like probably the '90s at that point. So it would have been that cheesy way of doing it. But I think you couldn't have gotten those same people to do the movie now, or at least back then to make that sequel. That's the only thing.
Yeah. I mean, the same people wouldn't have been able to do it, but I mean, like it says, I mean, Keaton and Ryder had already signed on, and it would have really been getting the rest of them to sign on. But it's really selling the script, selling the movie. Like, is Geffen going to pick it up again? Is Warner Brothers going to distribute? There's a whole lot of questions. And the real question now is like, they have a script, obviously, because they were writing it. Maybe it's half written. Maybe it's not written. Who knows? There's a sequel now.
Well, it's probably not going to be based on the original idea for the sequel, but I mean, you know what I mean? I mean,
How much of this script, though, is going to be the sequel now?
I mean, or it could basically just go a different direction. That's probably what they're doing now.
Yeah.
I don't think they're doing that.
So we already did say, Keaton appears less than 18 minutes in the movie. What people probably don't know is when Netflix.com launched in 1998, the first DVD the service shipped to customers was Beetlejuice.
And see, that's surprising to me because I remember, I mean, it's pretty sad when you remember as a kid that, you would go to like Blockbuster, and you go
I used
there.
to work at Blockbuster.
Of course you did, man. No, but it's pretty sad. You go to Blockbuster and you're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to go see whatever movies they have or like video games or whatever. And then like Netflix comes out and you're like, oh, like this is great. I could just go, to like just go online or what. Well, I mean, granted, yes. Was there an online in that time? Sure. But I'm like, it wasn't as developed as it is now where, Netflix really didn't kick off until like early 2000s where, that's when Blockbuster was kind of like slowly dying off because they realized like, who wants to go to a store when you can literally get it sent to your home? Like all the DVDs and all this other stuff. So it is interesting that Netflix was like, you know what? We're going to make this the first movie that we're going to start, sending to people because we're like, hey, you know what? We want people to come, use our service. And this is the one movie that you decided to use. Like, I don't understand. Like, what is it like? Oh, we got the 10-year anniversary of Beetlejuice. Here you go, guys. We're going to send it right to you free of charge.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's crazy. And I do know, I mean, there's a lot more different facts and, we could talk more about all the different facts. I know one of the bigger ones that I had, and I don't have it here, obviously, is Michael Keaton actually like Tim Burton encouraged, not just Michael Keaton, but like Alec Baldwin and all the different actors and actresses on the movie to very much improvise. Like he was big, and I don't know if he's like this in every movie that he does, but he was big with them, like improvise as much as you want to.
Which is pretty rare for a director because a lot of times they don't want a lot of actors to do that
Yeah.
because like sometimes like certain movies, I think that improvisation is great, but like literally to base the whole movie on improvisation and like you don't really know and you're just gonna go with the flow of whatever people's reactions are in that moment, like it could have easily made or break that movie in like 10 seconds. You know what I mean? Because like I
Yeah.
don't think it would have done as well. So it's interesting that you say that because like there's like I would say Johnny Depp in a lot of his roles that he's done with Tim Burton, he probably improvised a lot of his stuff.
Yeah. And Michael Keaton actually, like in one of the interviews when he's talking about doing this movie, he calls it rave acting because in this role, he would arrive to set, like get all the makeup, and when he would go on, it would be 10 to 12 hours of going hard. And then you go home and you sleep for a couple hours, and then you go back the next day and do it all over again, and you go hard for another 10 or 12 hours. So
No
it
way.
very much was like rave acting where, I don't party like that, but some people do.
I mean, I sure don't. I can't.
I don't party like that. I'm too old.
Oh, now you want to admit you're old? I'm just saying.
I'm too old for that now, but it's literally like people that do raves. Like they'll go to a rave and then they'll sleep for a couple hours and then they'll go to another rave, and it's like I don't know who has the energy for that.
And you're clearly on some kind of substance because there's no way in the world that you're going to be getting a couple hours and then doing that all over again.
But then you see like that scene where when the Maitlands first meet Beetlejuice, and then you take that improvisation and you go, "Oh yeah, like that totally makes sense to me now."
There's only one other person that I realized that and we talked about him was Michael J. Fox when he was doing, Back to the Future, and then what was the show? I can't remember off the top of my head.
Family Ties?
Yes, Family Ties. I'm sorry. All right, I'm a little sleep. I'm a little exhausted right now. Anyways, but like, yes. So I know that like him, for example, like he was going ham every day to do both of those, both of the show and the movies at the time. So like I can't even imagine like, if you're trying to be like, hey, you know what, I'm going to be like Michael Keaton. I'm going to do 10, 12 hours of work and then straight up just like get a couple hours of sleep and then do it all over again. Like who has the human capacity?
Well, I know with Michael Keaton, it was funny because there was a story where he actually showed up at the Family Ties set.
Oh, of course.
And I mean, they were filming Family Ties. So it wasn't like he showed up and was like in, Marty outfit, but no,
yeah.
he showed up to the Family Ties ready to film, and instantly he was like, "Where's the gun? Like I can't find the gun." Like he was looking for the gun, and everyone was like, "What are you talking about?" He was talking about the gun that he needed for Back to the Future, but he was at Family Ties. So like he was literally, I mean, when he would do Family Ties, he would leave and then go and do Back to the Future, maybe sleep for a couple hours if he even did that, and then he would go back to do Family Ties and then go back to doing. So it was like just back and forth, and then he just got confused of like, I need like these props. They're like, no, we're doing a different thing right now.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's why the human capacity. I mean, if you only got a couple hours of sleep for, I don't even know how long you'd be really filming for. I don't know if it's like a few months or something. I mean, you go insane at that point.
I can tell you though, I would love to see deleted scenes.
Oh yeah,
of Michael Keaton doing Beetlejuice, like improving as Beetlejuice.
Oh,
I think those scenes would be freaking awesome.
I think what they should do is like, if they ever did like with the sequel, if they ever came out with it, they should do like the 1 and 2, and then like have like deleted scenes from like so many years ago, and then like show you like what he did like at that time to like show the bloopers, show all that like those scenes and whatnot. I mean, you're right. I think it would be interesting to see how what actually made the cut, and then what were the ones that were like, okay, well, we really don't want to use this. We're just going to make them as bloopers or something like that. Like that's where I'm kind of curious.
Like to sit there and like have like maybe Michael Keaton and Alec Baldwin and all these people like in a room and be like, when Michael Keaton was going off, like what was your reaction? And I don't know if this interview has ever taken place, but that would be an awesome interview.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Just being like, when he's going off and you have no idea where he's going, like, is what we're seeing on screen like an honest reaction, or like, are you just prepared for what he was doing because it's in the script?
I think, in my personal opinion, I think it was more they really didn't know, and they just kind of went. They just went with the flow, because I think that's what, like, if you look at like the Joker and things like that, like when a lot of those actors were playing Joker, like nobody knew really what Jared Leto was doing, or Heath Ledger, or a lot of the other ones that were portraying him, and like I feel like in those kinds of roles, like if the more spontaneity you can get, the more funnier and the more like probably realness to the actual like movie plot and everything else, like really makes it more viewing for at least the viewers wise. But I was going to say, I know we mentioned the animated show, already for like, some other the media stuff.
Yeah.
And what I didn't know, and this is why I kind of had to look this up too, was I did not realize that there was video games attached to Beetlejuice, which again, the movie came out in 88. I mean, a lot of these games came out a little bit later, but like, I'm going to say it, Matt, ready? Because I know he knows this. The fact that there was one called Adventures of Beetlejuice, Skeletons in the Closet, and it was originally made for MS-DOS. I'm going to say this, okay? Yes, I'm going to use my age for a minute. I never once, ever used MS-DOS, and I understand you're going to be like, well, in high school, I I remember using MS-DOS. Go ahead. You tell me I'm wrong.
Well, I wasn't in high school in 1990, John.
No, so. But I mean, you do remember MS-DOS though.
But yes, I do remember MS-DOS because computers had MS-DOS before. I mean, even with Windows, they used MS-DOS, and there were games. I mean, granted, Adventures of Beetlejuice I've never played.
Oh, I would have laughed if you
heard of.
Yep.
But most MS-DOS games were all text based. Like they were all like commands that you would put in, and but yeah, I mean, most of the computers back then were all MS-DOS. So if you wanted a file, you had to actually type in where the file was located just to open it.
And that's if you were a computer genius back in the day to be able to figure that out. Not like a regular person, like one of us, and just being able to like, oh, let me look this up on my my computer real quick. I can probably like do the search bar and be like, oh, here it is. But I did find it interesting that, of course, Nintendo, the good old Nintendo boys, they always like 91. They decided to make a Beetlejuice game. And of course, rare. Yes, a very rare one on the NES. And then they also did it for the Game Boy.
Also by Rare.
Yeah, by Rare. And then, so Beetlejuice, Horrific Hijinks from the Netherworld. So and of course, this was based on the animated series, right. But I just think it's interesting how of course, like NES in general, like Nintendo really just wanted to like get anything they could. They're like, oh, everything. Oh, this is selling. Oh, we're just going to make a video game. Really? Because let's talk about E.T. Yeah, you see that awkward silence? Yeah, that's the reason why, because we don't talk about it, because it's not it's actually the worst selling game of all time. I'm surprised this wasn't like one of the worst selling games of all time. That's just me.
Yeah. But so, I mean, going back to the animated show, it did run for 4 seasons. So, I mean, where, most shows, if you look at, I mean, I think even G.I. Joe didn't really run for that many.
But it had a lot of episodes.
It did have a lot of episodes, and I don't know how many, episodes the animated show has, but for 4 seasons, that's pretty good.
No, I mean, for what it was. I mean, but I mean, if you look at nowadays, I mean, a lot of shows can vary from, unfortunately, 1 season to you can have 10 plus seasons. I mean, it all depends on how popular.
I think at a certain point, even though Beetlejuice is a character and it's iconic and it's a great movie, it's a great animated show. In the 90s, people lost interest really quick on things. You know what I mean? Like zombies were one of those things that like people just lost interest.
Yeah,
And
I
I
mean,
think Beetlejuice was one of those things. Like, it,
you could only take so much of it. I mean, it's not like nowadays they're like, oh, let's reinvent the wheel, and they'll just take the literally a design from that happened like the 80s, 90s,
yeah.
or even earlier than that, and they're like, you know what, let's just recreate it. So like, I always think of Tron. I always think of like all the movies that
Well,
you.
and they want something new. I mean, you take GI Joe, and yeah, they were great in the '80s, and then you take them in the '90s, and it's like GI Joe this, GI Joe that, and Transformers was another one.
Oh yeah.
Beast Wars, and you have all these like
Well, actually, I
all
do
these
remember
like
Beast Wars, but no, I agree. But like a lot of like, if you take they only did animated. You never noticed the live action because if they did live action, oh my god! Like if you want to talk about Mortal Kombat, I'm just
hey,
saying.
we're not going there.
I'm just saying, like, but like you see it nowadays where if you did anything animated back then, they're gonna make it real live action now because you have not seen too many animated remakes of certain things because like
Right.
like, I mean, I can say, like, for example, the one thing I am looking forward to was the X-Men, 97, and they're continuing that. That makes sense. But if they're like, hey, you know what, we're gonna make this like a live action, I'm like, you've really just killed, and you've honestly just lost a fanboy. Like, I'm sorry, like you just destroyed my childhood right there. Don't ever do that. Like, keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. So the other couple things, I mean, there was a Broadway stage musical, and I say there was because actually I think there might still be, but it probably isn't what it was.
Look, it's not Hamilton, okay? It's not like on
Well,
that
I mean,
level.
COVID really did a number on a lot of Broadway, stage, musicals or shows, because they just weren't able to do it. And when you're not able to do stuff like that, like you lose funding and you lose money. And when you lose money, you can't unfortunately do them anymore. But there was a stage, musical for Beetlejuice, which was quite popular.
See, I'm honestly surprised because like I'm actually, you know what? I can't say that because they did Shrek the musical, they've done SpongeBob the musical, they've done all kinds of musicals.
There's actually an Evil Dead musical, which I went to.
Of course you did, but I'm just thinking to myself as like Broadway will do anything that honestly, if it's popular, like Shrek, SpongeBob, things like that. It's like okay, cool.
I've never seen it, but I mean, from what I understand, it was pretty. It was a pretty good show.
Hmm.
So I mean, it obviously like Beetlejuice isn't going anywhere, and
I mean, the only thing that they're really going with is the whole sequel.
I mean there is a sequel, and I mean for years there was rumors of a sequel, and then we just never heard anything from it, and then all of a sudden, hey, we're filming a sequel.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It takes 35 years to finally make a sequel or so.
And, they're doing it, they're producing it alongside Warner Brothers. Keaton, Ryder are reprising their roles. And, it was reported that Burton was reteaming with Jenna Ortega for the role, for a role in the sequel.
So I think so what's funny about Jenna Ortega is like she's done a really great job with Wednesday, like the TV show.
Yeah.
So they done a really good job with like portraying her, and I think she's done a really great, job overall in what she's been doing. So it makes sense that Tim Burton wants to seek her because I honestly love that show on Netflix because it was honestly one of the best ones I've seen in a while, and it was really interesting. It was really like engaging and whatnot, and so like she made a really good representation of Wednesday. But like I think she would kind of fit in that realm of what they're trying to do with.
So
with
she's
Beetlejuice.
supposed to be playing Lydia's daughter.
Mm. Okay, I mean that makes sense. I mean, for me, it's like if you want to take a modern take and if you wanted to do what you're doing, yeah, you definitely want to have her because she's kind of that new wave of the gothic, kind of like style that he's looking for.
And Keaton actually had said when they were done filming, Keaton actually said that filming this sequel was the most fun he's had ever on a movie.
That's surprising to me, anyways, because I would have thought he would have done, other movies and he would have been like, "Oh, this is great." But like the fact that this movie is like his,
it's just the
pinnacle
fact
point.
that like when an actor actually comes out and says like, "This is the most fun I've ever had on a filming a movie,"
right?
Like that he probably just went off.
Well, not only that, I mean, because if Tim Burton, again, if he's gonna be, this is why I'm saying this is like if he's giving him the creative freedom to, to do all of what he's done, then yeah, of course he's gonna have so much fun because now hopefully he's not gonna be in for less than 18 minutes.
No, I hope he's in there for a lot more than 18 minutes, but
maybe, Matt, maybe what I'll do is I'll watch this one, and maybe I'll go back to watching the original. We'll see. I don't know yet. I'll base it off of this one.
You have to keep an open mind.
I'm trying, Matt, but I'm telling you,
You have to somehow separate your fear of mushrooms from your fear of Beetlejuice.
look.
You can still be afraid of mushrooms, John, but you can get over your fear of Beetlejuice because Beetlejuice is not a horror movie like you would be watching Saw. It's definitely like you come at it like a typical 80s comedy, and you'll have a much different experience than thinking of like, oh, this movie's straight up horror.
I mean, if I was to watch the original script movie version, I probably would have been like, nah, I'm good. I would have been all set. But like, I agree. I think the one thing that I'll try is maybe I won't have pizza with mushrooms in it again. And maybe what I'll do is I'll just watch the movie with no snacks, no nothing, and just watch it for what it is. And maybe I'll give it a shot again. I'm
like
just
I said, I think if you come at it thinking like this is a comedy, maybe you just have to tell yourself when you're watching it, this is a comedy. This is a comedy. This is a comedy. This is a comedy.
So I'll just pick, this is a comedy. And then, of course, that one scene that I talk about, I'm like, this is a comedy. I was like, this is a comedy, and I just keep doing that. But I'm like, we'll see.
Because that scene is meant to be funny.
Well, to me, it really wasn't that funny as a kid. But I mean, I get what you're saying. I think, like I said, maybe what I'll do is I'll watch the sequel. I'll give that a shot, and then maybe I'll go back and we'll reconvene the idea again. But guys, we appreciate you listening to the podcast. Hopefully, you guys have seen our merch store. We actually just dropped a Halloween pin, and
We did.
and it's like a purple orange kind of theme to it. So it's interesting. So if you get a chance to look at it or even maybe buy it, it's up to you. It'd be really cool if you did, but we get it. I mean, we're actually trying to do more stuff for really Christmas moving forward. But we understand it was kind of like a late drop. We understand because again, we're both busy. We're both trying to do things. But I mean, at the end of the day, anything that you guys can do to show your love, again, email, whatever. I mean, the fact that it was a random email, hey, you know what? That's great. I love reading that kind of stuff from time to time. But at the end of the day, we just want to thank you guys, and hopefully one day when we're big and famous, maybe one day, we'll be able to donate some money to, different organizations that, Matt and I have been wanting to do for a while instead of like giving like $2 for, an organization or something like that. Maybe we'll try to do like a $500 or $1,000 donation,
maybe not $2.04.
4 cents. But anyways, guys, we appreciate it.
I do have one thing.
My bad,
on our Facebook page, I do have a link to a site that I made a trailer for. It's the Edit Fest Film Supply Contest. So I made a trailer for this contest. So if you can go to the site, watch my trailer, and then please vote for my trailer, that would be fantastic.
But anyways, guys, we appreciate it. We love you guys. And till next time.
Stay geeky.